Well, we begin here, of course, what's on most people's lips in terms of the news. World leaders sent their well wishes to U.S. President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump after news that the couple had tested positive for COVID-19. Roughly 17 hours after he made his diagnosis public, Trump walked slowly from the White House to a waiting helicopter to be taken to the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. This was President Trump's message before he was transported to hospital.
I want to thank everybody for the tremendous support. I'm going to Walter Reed Hospital. I think I'm doing very well, but we're going to make sure that things work out. The First Lady is doing very well. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. I will never forget it. Thank you.
Well, the White House says that President Donald Trump will work in a special suite at the hospital for the next few days as a precautionary measure. The diagnosis was the latest setback for the Republican president, who is trailing Democratic rival Joe Biden in opinion polls ahead of the November 3rd presidential election. White House Dr. Sean P. Conley said that the 74-year-old president was doing very well and did not need supplementary oxygen. Trump has also received a first dose of remdesivir, antiretroviral drug sold by Gilead Sciences Inc. that has been shown to shorten hospital stays. Trump has played down the threat of the coronavirus pandemic from the outset, even as the disease has killed more than 200,000 Americans and hammered the U.S. economy. A number of other prominent Republicans also tested positive on Friday, including former White House senior advisor Kellyanne Conway and Republican Senators Mike Lee and Tom Tillis. Trump is the latest world leader to test positive for the virus. Others include British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro. Both men recovered. Well, the Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden says that President Trump's coronavirus diagnosis is a bracing reminder that the pandemic needs to be taken seriously. Biden was campaigning in the battleground state of Michigan.
I would like to start by acknowledging, which I'm sure all of you do as well, sending my prayers for the health and safety of the First Lady and President of the United States after they tested positive for COVID-19. My wife Jill and I prayed that they'll make a quick and full recovery. This is not a matter of politics. It's a bracing reminder to all of us that we have to take this virus seriously. It's not going away automatically. We have to do our part to be responsible. It means following the science, listening to the experts, washing our hands, social distancing. It means wearing a mask in public, and it means encouraging others to do so as well.
All right, well, U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi says that plans for continuing government should President Donald Trump become incapacitated remain in place. With elections just a month away, there is a lot of concern around the situation. Brooke Spector, U.S. foreign policy expert and associate editor at the Daily Maverick, joins us now via Zoom. A very good afternoon to you, Mr. Spector, and thank you so very much for availing yourself to SABC News.
Oh, good afternoon. Good to be with you.
It's very interesting to see some of the well wishes and the support that President Trump is receiving from who people we perceive to be his political foes. What do you make of this? Is this all sort of, being diplomatic? I mean, if this were to happen to anybody else, Trump wouldn't have been this diplomatic. I wonder what you think of all this sort of support he's kind of receiving from who we perceive to be his enemies.
Well, I mean, I think to some degree it's a reflection of the kind of character his opponent, Joe Biden, is. He's a naturally warm and empathetic man. And I suspect that nobody would wish to win an election against an opponent who has been laid low by a life-threatening illness and have that somehow seen as one of the ways by which you win your victory, whether it's for a mayor, senator, governor, president of the United States. But Also, as your lead-in explained, there are concerns about the man individually, but there are also efforts to reassure people that the process of government, the control of the government mechanisms, the management of government affairs do not suddenly kick into crisis mode simply because the president is spending some time in the hospital, even though it is a potentially fatal illness, as we all know. But there is a subtle political point being made still by Joe Biden, which is one of the things that a president, a leader must do is demonstrate faith in the science and the public health experts. And it is not a disease that's going to let you pass by unscathed simply because you're in high office. And in his speech that you were showing an excerpt from in Grand Rapids, Michigan, he's making that point fairly explicitly that we're all in this together. The mechanisms of government are in place, but we all have to pay attention and do our part. Those are the key parts of his message. And it should not escape notice that that is a serious counterpoint to the way Donald Trump has been phrasing his message on the campaign. Now, also, you throw into this mix the fact that the campaign that Donald Trump has been waging has basically ground to a halt. Even his campaign manager, the newest one, has been found to be positive for COVID-19. And it is not clear that there really is much of any kind of plan going forward yet as to how they, the Republicans, are going to campaign for Donald Trump's reelection. Remember, there's a debate this week coming between the two vice presidential candidates, and there are still two more scheduled presidential debates. But coming on the tail of the first presidential debate, the one that happened earlier this week, you have to wonder whether or not Republicans really want to see a repeat of such a fiasco.
I wonder now because, Trump has been quite firm on his views on the coronavirus and really kind of not taking it very seriously. During the debate, in fact, he was making fun of Biden wearing a mask, for example. Will the Republican Party now really have to shift their messaging around coronavirus? And I wonder what that means for Trump, who really a lot of people started to support him based on his warped views of this virus. I mean, I'm sure you know of some campaigns and some groups of people who had actually been refusing to adhere to COVID-19 regulations in support of Trump, or in fact taking Trump's advice. And I wonder now, will there be a sort of a backflip in terms of having to then change the narrative or change what Trump has consistently been saying about the coronavirus?
Well, two things are true in regard to your question. One, it is very late in the day to suddenly do a 180-degree, as you call it, backflip off of the message you have been using for the last year. And I don't think most voters will be enormously enthused about the idea of making sudden switches in that way. But even more interesting and important is that although we tend to think of November 3rd, Election Day, as the day when all the voters show up and stand in line and get to cast their ballot, in fact, many, many people in the United States, perhaps as many as 80 million or so, will cast their ballots either via advance voting, that is between now and the election day, or by mail-in or absentee ballots. And if that's true, there is a large and constantly growing core of voters who have already cast their ballots or will do very, very shortly, which means that any message change is going to fall not only on deaf ears, but on ears that are no longer paying attention to the modulations in a message. And so I don't think the Republicans are in a position really to make that kind of enormous, almost tectonic switch. What you may see, though, is a number of Republican senators and congressmen and women who are in very tight races in their respective districts or states you may see some of them begin to edge away from their up till now almost unlockable embrace of the president, because they want to protect their own electoral chances. And if the population doesn't appear to be absorbing well the message that the Republican Party, the president, has been dispensing, they may want to show something that many voters will tend to value, which is the independence of my person in Congress, the independence of my person in the Senate. And for some Republicans in marginal districts, that may spell the difference between winning and losing.
I wonder, Mr. Spector, I mean, will this really play, and I suppose I'm asking you to kind of see it from a PR side of things, but could this work in his favor? Could this work in President Donald Trump's favor? I mean, the fact that there has been, some sort of sympathy around him, at the end of the day, he's 74 years old, so he's not very young anymore. The fact that we're all talking about him, if you switch on to just about any news network at the moment, they're talking about Trump. And actually, that's quite great if you're looking at it in terms of PR. He's being more spoken about at the moment than Biden. And I wonder, is it possible for that then to reflect in the results where we see this having actually been kind of positive for him, ironically?
I hear what you're saying, and I've had this debate with a couple of friends in the U.S. already, and we came to a kind of tentative conclusion that although there is some residue of the sympathy vote, there also may well be a significant number of voters who are basically prepared to say something on the order of, well, that serves you right. And then there is yet a third version of voters which may well be saying something like, doesn't make any difference. I've made up my decision on policy issues, on the virus as a whole, on climate change, on health care, on the question of law and order / racial redress. And the president's health, well or badly as it may be because of the virus, doesn't make much difference to me. So I think there are three possible ways voters could see this. Of that group of three, I think the sympathy vote is probably the weakest, because Donald Trump, to be fair, to be absolutely brutally honest, is not a very sympathetic character in the minds of many people who have yet to make up their mind.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much for giving us your time, Mr. Brooks Spector. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here on SABC News with us. That's Brooks Spector, U.S. foreign policy expert and associate editor at Daily Maverick. Thank you, sir.